Welcome to the Complete Competer. This is a basic guide to refereeing and competition with myself, Beth Davidson. This is a picture of me at my most recent World Championships, which took place in Zadar in Croatia. I achieved another silver medal in the women's sabre and a silver medal in the team sabre. These are a few of my accolades I've achieved over the years. I've certainly enjoyed my journey. It has had highs and lows, but really the sport of fencing has been a huge confidence, and I've gained so many friends and experiences along the way. So this session is about helping you to prepare for your first competition, or maybe competitions you're on many competitions, but things may be going wrong. These are some of the hacks that I've learned along the way, and people have showed me, and they've helped me as well. So a lot of this session is about preparation for competition, some of the things you may experience along the way, such as referees, the type of formats. So it's aimed at the very novice fencer, but a lot of the tips I've given you was given to me as a novice fencer, and I still use them to this day when I travel internationally trying to achieve World Championship medals. So I hope you find it enjoyable. Please contact me using the address at the end of the session, and I will help you if you've got any questions. In this session, we're going to cover a number of subjects. We're going to be talking about kit, how to test kit, what to take, the body side of things, so some of the physical things that helps you prepare and you need to consider. The mind, it's not going to be a psychology session in any way, but some little tips that maybe open you up to other ideas, because mental training is a huge subject. The environment you're going to experience, because every competition is different, and some of the things you need to consider depending on the level of competition. And then some of those essential people that make a competition run, such as the referee. If you're a fencer, I think you'll realise that it is a very kit-orientated sport. There's, apart from the kits that you have to fence with, the safety, the electric kit, bags, there are also other little things you need to consider and take through with you. So I've just sort of broken it down into a few parts. This is not extensive. There is a lot more than this. But a lot of things about kit and fencing is ensuring that you pass any sort of weapons check. Either it's an official weapons check at a competition, or it's a basic check done by a referee at every bout you're going to have. So in terms of weapons, all these things you can do either before you even travel to the competition, or that you can do when you arrive at the competition to make sure that it's going to pass any of the checks. So in terms of weapons, we've got check for rough edges. So weapons control, this is something they will look at. If there's any rough edges, you need to make sure that those are filed off. It is a safety thing. So if the edges have got burrs on, that's going to fail, and it's going to be dangerous, and it can harm your kit. Rust, this is quite easy in a damp fencing bag. So rust can accumulate, and that needs to be cleaned off. Again, this is something you can do before you even set off. And any rust on your white kit can be quite damaging, and it can also be unsightly. There's weight and gauges. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail later on. So having a weight for foil or épée, depending on which weapon you're going to use. So the weight needs to be 500 gram weight for foil and a 750 gram weight for épée. Gauge, which is mainly used for épée, but there is an actual gauge. The gauge can be used for sabre. Make sure your weapon is actually tight. These can come loose quite easily through use and storage. So just check that the bolt that holds it all together is nicely tightened up. And also make sure that you've got the right Allen key to tighten up if it comes loose during the day. Check that you've got your grub screws if you're an epéist. Again, I'll go into a little bit of detail that this is a potential fail. Have some spares in a little kit bag. A basic tool kit, it doesn't have to be extensive. Screwdrivers, Allen key are some of the things that don't take up much room or weight. And always make sure you have a spare weapon. So it's a legal requirement during competition that a spare weapon and body wire is present on the side of the piece, because if any of those things go wrong, it's going to be a yellow card if it breaks at all. So these things you can avoid straight away. So in terms of wires, again, make sure you've got lots of spares. The little things you can make sure that the resistance isn't too high, so you can just undo and redo the contact screws. The resistance needs to be less than 1 ohm. Again, I'm going to show you how that happens, and you can check. So those are wire checks to make sure they're not faulty and are going to pass any test that is going to happen at the competition. It also means that, when you're least likely, if something is going wrong when you test before going on about, it's less hassle and frustration. You want to be able to come on piece, get clipped on, no white lights, and your weapon is working thoroughly. If there's any white lights, it's more likely to be your opponent. So let your opponent fluster and get distracted. Your safety fencing white, so this is your main sort of wearable fencing kit. Again, check for holes. Make sure that there's no seams broken. If any holes are wiring through, it's an obvious one. You will not be allowed to wear it if it's spotted by the referee. You shouldn't be wearing it because it's your life that's at stake if it goes wrong. So please make sure that you've checked, replaced. You can repair these things as long as it's of the right standard. Your safety level of kit, it's depending what age you are. If you're in an under 13 competition or using smaller sized blades, or if you're using full adult sized blades, these require different levels of it's called newtonage, so how much pressure it takes for a blade to pass through. So for younger age groups, they have a different set of kit of a different sort of safety standard to adults. So make sure that this is correct for your age and competition that you're going to, whether it's a national competition or whether it's an FIE international competition. Because again, you will not be allowed to wear it, and it could be a failure and a yellow card if the referee spots it. I'm now going to take you on a whistle-stop tour of the ways you can check your weapons and body wires for all weapons, foil, épée and sabre, and some of the easy fixes that you can do to maintain the best sort of results and keep it working during the competition. So going from left to right, we've got a test box. This is a Liam Paul pebble test box. It is good for épée and foil, not very good for sabre. We've got some body wires, we've got some screwdrivers, we've got a gauge, a weight, and something that's worth investing in is a multimeter. So this tests any resistance that you might have in your wires, and even checking your lames with it. Okay, so with regards to body wires, we've got both two versions here for foil and sabre, which is the 2-pin and the bayonet system, which you'll probably see mainly with Liam Paul. To fix these, if they're faulty, it's a few things you need to look at. Is you need to pull off this sheath. So before every competition I check, and also I might just adjust a few things by pulling it out and exposing some of the grub screws. So when you pull this rubber sheath back, there are two screws here, so flathead screwdrivers. So to to make sure any resistance, to get rid of any possible resistance, because especially this end, which is the one that connects to your weapon, this gets the most sweatiest, and this can get very corroded. And so inside here there is a little grub screw. So all you need to do, you don't need to get it out, you just need to move it backwards and forwards, and this gets rid of an awful lot of possible corrosion. There's 2 of them, and so you just do that on both sides and then just wrap it back up. Okay, so I would do that as a general rule before every competition. If you're getting white lights, sometimes just doing that will solve the problem quite easily. 2-pin is the same, so you just need to take out these 2 little screws, and it'll expose the body wires, also the wires connecting to it, and you just check if they're loose. For épée, on the other end of your wire, if you pull the sheath out, you've got those screws again here, so just give them a waggle, tighten them back up, and that's sorted. If you have a broken wire, so when you have get wires, I would certainly make sure that they're clear coated. A lot of competitions require clear coated body wires or body cords. These make it really easy to identify any broken ones inside. So if you think something might be broken, what you do is you just stretch it, so pull it tight, and this exposes the broken core inside. If that's the case, all you need to do is get a pair of pliers, snippers, cut it off at that point, and then re-thread it through into the part where you have to loosen off, and it punctures. This grub screw has a very sharp end, and it punctures the plastic sheathing to get to the core of the wire, and then that's fine. So that's how you can probably make sure things are working to the standards, because each one of these needs to be at least no more than 1 ohm of resistance. Now, how to check for resistance, again, this is something I would do before every competition. This is where this multimeter comes in. They're relatively cheap, and you should keep it within your armoury. To use it, you've got 2 probes. Okay, so 2 probes, when they're connected up, you can see that should go to 0. To test your body wires, you need to make sure you're touching one end is equal to the other end. That's what I'll do. So with the bayonet style Liam Paul wires, what I do is if I put it on the outside, so that there's things called outside, inside, other. So on Liam Paul body wires, bayonet style, it's the outside. So this is outside, this is inside. So I'll place the probe on the outside, and the connecting part on the other end is the outside one. So it's outside, inside, other. Now if I touch, you can see the numbers on the multimeter go down to 0. So that means it's a very low resistance within the rules. If I push the probe on the tip, if I can get it on, so that's inside. If I touch the inside middle pin, it goes down to 0. And then other, i.e. being this other pin here, that is links to the crocodile clip, and so that should be as low as possible. Okay, it's flicking around a little bit because I'm not holding it steady. So that body wire is legal for competitions, seems to be functioning very well. 2 pins, so this is more foil sabre international style, so All-Star, Ullman, PBT, the international manufacturers. To know which one is outside, inside, or to correspond with the 3-pin area, so you got fat one. If you can see, this one's a little bit fatter than this one. So you hold your multimeter probe on fat one, and that's the outside. Okay. So that wire goes down to 0. The other one is inside, and so that's the middle pin. And then the other is the crocodile clip, and that is your 2-pin. Okay, so once you've tested the resistance side of things, testing your weapons has a number of things you should keep in your weapons bag. So foil and épée. So for épée you need a weight and you need a gauge. This weight is 750 grams. A foil weight would be 500 grams. And how you test your weapon, this is where the test box comes in. So make sure it's switched on. Okay, so I'm going to switch this on to épée. Yeah, so it gives a satisfactory beep. The other part of the body wire goes into the guard, like that. Okay, and then just use the tip of the sword to check that it actually works. So I'm just pressing in the tip of the sword. That means that it works. Now the next phase is how to check an épée, whether it's legal or not. I'll need to do this slightly differently for camera. So an épée, you've got 2 grub screws at the barrel. This keeps the tip in. Both those grub screws should be present, and this, if a competition is properly reffed, the referee should check for both grub screws. If one's missing, you'll get a yellow card. So this is something you're in control. So always check that your weapon has both grub screws in before presenting it to the referee. The next thing the referee will check is its gap. So the barrel has a gap here. That needs to be a legal limit of about 1 millimeter. So that's this one. So it's checked that it passes in very easily. The next one, which is one épéists always generally fear, is the travel. So the travel is the distance between pressing and the actual hit being recorded, and that's the thinnest parts at the end here. So what you do is you push it in and then press down. Now, I know this weapon is going to fail a travel check because you can hear the box firing off. That means that the travel of this is too narrow. It's not traveling far enough without actually recording a hit. So to test it, you should push it in one side, press down. If that passes the test, you place it at another angle, 2 angles, and do the same. So this weapon has failed. Never push the button down and then twist with the button down. Okay, this wears this very, very fine gapping tool, and then it makes this tool redundant. If the travel and the gap is legal, then you can put the weight on. So this needs to be held upright. Place the weight on top and you press it down. You should hear a beep. That means there's nothing wrong. But what it should do, the spring inside should be strong enough to push the weight back up. So I'll just show it again. So I've placed it on top. There's no beep, which is good. Press it down. It pushes back up. So this means this weapon is legal for weight. So it's certainly pushing up more than 750 grams. So once that you've done that, that means your weapon is legal to compete in épée. The next topic we're going to cover is about the body. This is going to be a very brief scope across the things that I have picked up and used to help me perform at the highest. But all of these are very personal. If you have your system, which has been tried and tested, and it works for you, continue it. But we all should tailor this to our own preferences. So some of the things I do use is either about food or the things I wear or how I use physically to get warmed up ready for fencing. So in the top left-hand corner of the slide, you can see what looks like a jumper or a top that can be used as an undergarment. So this is a base layer. As we fence, we get very, very sweaty, and this sweat is fine if it's warm, but the nature of fencing is we stop and start. So this means we're going to get cooled down quite quickly. So base layers I've found a really essential part of my other sort of kit that I take. So it keeps me warm, it doesn't chill me, and then I can just warm up naturally, ready for my next fight. The next part of the slide is in the middle of the top. There is a picture of, it does say Lucozade. Now this is nothing against Lucozade per se, but it's the way these type of drinks get marketed. They're marketed as sports drinks, and they're marketed as drinks that are isotonic or will help us perform highly. Now, unless you really understand the nature of these drinks on a body generally, or your body, I would really take caution to these type of things. Lucozade, as demonstrated there, is a very highly sugared type of drink. Now, highly sugared type of drinks are more catered for as a recovery drink, and not something that keeps you hydrated during a competition. High sugar drinks mean that your insulin spikes and then it drops quite quickly. And in reality, high sugary drinks like this actually dehydrate you in a way rather than hydrating you, because they're just too strong. If you do have them, I would, because there's not much other choice, I would water them down to about 50%. They're also very expensive. They're not reusable in terms, the bottles tend to be throwaway and not reusable. So look into how you can make your own hydration drinks. It's incredibly cheap, and it will actually make you perform and hydrate better. In the top right is a picture of what looks like pills, and yes, supplements and medication can be part and parcel of sport, and there's obviously a lot of controversy around it, or things that it's something that you do need to have. But again, you need, as a sports person, as a fencer, you have a code of conduct to be a clean athlete. And any medicines you take or any supplements you take is subject to a drugs test if you're competing at a highest level. Now, if you need medication for health reasons, there is a system called a therapeutic use exemption form you need to complete if you're competing. So there are some drugs that are banned, or that are not fair to the sport, but you are allowed to use them for therapeutic use because it's of a medical condition. But you need a consent form that is signed up, and it's a TUE. So please look into that if you need to use any medication whatsoever. That you're covered for it. Supplements is again another area you need to be really cautious about. There are a lot of supplements that are available anywhere, health food shops, supermarkets, but they could contain substances which are actually banned, and there are a lot of people, a lot of high profile athletes have been banned from the sport because of this. So I'd certainly recommend you not taking supplements unless it's for health reasons. Now, during the day, every competition is different. It depends where it is and what is available in terms of food and drinks. I would look into that before going. If I know there's going to be a good cafe there, I might not need to take as much food as I do if there isn't a cafe. But I take very much control of this before I even set off. So things like snacks, healthy snacks, are important if you don't have any access to these sort of things at the venue. They're generally easy, small, light to carry, and you know exactly what's in them. I make my own muesli bars, so I know exactly what is going to be contained in them. So the complex carbohydrate, the mixture of nuts and oats and fruit and things are all very good to maintain your energy levels. But again, be cautious about the sugar that is contained in them, because it's, fencing, you have to try and keep those energy levels potentially over a long period of time. It's a stop-start event, and this needs to be thought about. In the bottom left-hand corner, it looks like a pair of legs. I love taking resistance bands. I use them to train with generally, but I also use them as a warm-up. They're very light to carry and they don't take up much room. So please, look at finding some exercises in which you can maybe warm up with them just before you start fencing. This slide is looking into some of the things that I do in terms of the psychology. Fencing is a very cognitive sport. I'm not disparaging any other sport, but fencing has its very particular needs. It's obviously very fast. You're very close to an opponent when you're in combat. The moments of when you're fencing and then not fencing are those moments which can be fraught with doubts and an uncertainty. So it's definitely a huge subject which I would encourage you to look into to see if you can find your own training system to prepare the mind for competition and training. One of the things which is certainly a big topic at the moment is sleep. Sleep is the best performance enhancer. The people like Roger Federer, who was incredibly successful, then he had a period of unsuccess, so he wasn't as winning his Wimbledons. He was an older player at the time. He worked with his team of physiologists and his coaches, and they looked at his sleep and his sleep patterns and how to use sleep before and after training. And this made a huge difference to his performance. All his opponents were thinking, what's happened to Roger? Is he taking anything, like supplements? But no, it wasn't. The only thing he really changed was his sleep patterns. So I really encourage you to get a really good night's sleep, more than 8 hours of good quality sleep. Get rid of any phones or any devices out of your room before you go to bed. Breathing. Now, this is something, we think, well, everybody breathes, but it's how you breathe. And yes, I have, I do mindfulness, and I do like to look into things that what maybe seem like Buddhism or stuff like that. But, mindfulness has really helped me understand how to relax and how to practically do stuff in which will help me prepare the mind and the body ready for the best performances. So breathing is an essential part of understanding how you can control your breath. So as we're nervous, we tend to breathe quite shallow, and this isn't getting the oxygen into the right parts. It also increases certain hormones, stress hormones, such as cortisol, which is a byproduct of high intensity and general stress. And this can make you really nervous. It can make you think about not the right things. So just stopping and breathing, look at 4 seconds or 4 seconds in and holding and 4 seconds out. This has a huge calming effect. It allows the brain to unscramble and allows you to create some attention to the moment. So please slow down your breath if you're feeling very uptight. Now, if you're feeling very calm, which can be another thing, you might have to increase the breath rate to actually create some energy into you. So again, this is all quite personal, and there's a lot of topics on YouTube and on the internet you can look into. Now, fencing, it's a natural combat sport, and the word competition to a lot of people usually festers up lots of nerves, So it's this flight, freeze, or fence, or fight normally. It's our reptilian part of the brain. It's a part of our brain that hasn't really evolved since we were very early cave people, which we needed these things to survive the animals and things. But as obviously we evolved as culturally, we don't need to run away from a saber-toothed tiger. But we do, sometimes we need to jump out of the way of danger. But we do now respond to stress in a very primitive sort of way. And this, if we go to a competition, our stress responses are the same as if we were being chased by a lion. So we need to, again, use our breath to calm ourselves down. And we need to ensure that the adrenaline that we're producing as a product of competition is you need a bit of adrenaline to be able to perform at the highest, but too much adrenaline can hamper how the brain works, how you think through your bout. So try to balance all that out using your breath, using calming techniques that you might come across on your journey. And also, this is I tell myself, and I know I don't do it enough, and people do joke about my miserable face at times, my competition face. But when I'm coaching somebody, I always say, smile and remember why you started all this. We're here. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something you enjoy. And smiling is something you have control over. So if you smile, it generally calms you down. And if you breathe and smile, you can do something quite, get into the right frame of mind, ready for your bout. So these are all controllables. If you do this, get into the habit of this, you should see consistent performance enhancements. The environment. So competition environment can be incredibly stressful. So again, I'm going to go briefly across the things you're potentially going to be experiencing in the competition, in that environment. So once you've prepared all your kit, once you've packed your bag and ensured all those items are in your bag, that's a huge stage to get over, and things you can do and prepare. Getting there early, so know where the competition is, plan how you're going to get there, and if you're travelling by car, check that the roads are clear, and if the weather's not quite right, make sure that that you can give yourself a little bit of time. So when you get there early, it's how long do you need to be there early to be there? I planned this out over the many years because there are consistent things you have to do when you arrive at a venue ready for a competition. You need to know where the toilets are, where you can access to food and water. Is there an equipment stand? If you need any new kit or if you've had a fault, can you get it replaced? Where to find all the information, such as competition results, and where to find people if you need any help. So when you get there early, you can do all this. While you're in the competition, it's very noisy, very busy, but you need to listen out for announcements. There usually is a tannoy, which is it's generally terrible at the best, but you need to listen out for those announcements, because those announcements might tell you where you need to be on piste. And if you don't arrive on the piste on time, you can be eliminated from the competition. So those announcements, keep an ear out them. Don't just stand outside forever, otherwise you might not be able to progress. Now the officials, competitions generally in the UK are run by an army of volunteers, an army of extremely expert volunteers. So these are probably people who've done national, European, world and Olympics, and they do this as a volunteer. So I encourage everybody to volunteer at competitions, because if we didn't have volunteers, you would never be able to compete. So here's a list of some of the people, generally the main people who are available, who make competitions run. So at the top we've got the referees. So the referees have trained to be there. Yes, they are of varying standards and qualifications and varying experiences. So you'll come across lots of different, different people along the way. But again, you would not be able to compete if it wasn't for referees. So they are very hard worked. They're generally hungry, tired by the end of the day. Competition organiser. So that's the person who generally is accumulating the results, maybe in charge of all aspects of it. So that it's useful to know who that is and where to find them. The DT, which means Directoire Technique. These are the people that ensure that the rules of the competition are adhered to. So if you feel there's something wrong that is not allowing you to compete on a fair basis, the DT is the people who run this side of things. Every competition should have a welfare officer. They should be presented as at the information point. So if you have any welfare issue to report or have experienced, please contact the welfare officer and they can discuss it in confidence. There's medics, which are, again, it's an accident or ill health, we need to have a medic there. The armourers, this is a band of people who keep our competitions running in terms of equipment and keep your equipment running as well. They're absolutely vital. That I've had many armourer mend my equipment and allowed me to continue. So please, learn how to do it, but also, they, respect their time there. And then there's loads of volunteers for all sorts of reasons, running around, making collecting scores, putting papers up. These are really necessary jobs. So please look into them. It might be something you'd be interested in doing yourself or learning or qualifying. In terms of the competition, the venues change. Please, they're very busy. Try and find out how the pistes are laid out. So the numbers of the piste, do they go, is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pistes? So if you know where they are and you get called to a piste number, you know where to head for, because there can be very big halls, and also they can be run across multiple halls. You can ask the competition organisers where you might be fencing, and they can direct you. So this is all about stopping all the hassles of running around trying to figure out where you are, when you are, and it's in your control. So this slide is about the competition itself. Usually there are a lot of variants, but this is a common format that happens, is that you have a pool round or maybe 2 pool rounds, and then a direct elimination afterwards. Okay, the pool round is where all entrants to the competition are split into groups, into smaller groups, and each of you fence each other in that group. It's sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7 people. It could be more. It really depends on how the competition organiser has set things out. So be prepared. Check the board where you are, who's in your pool. You might be able to prepare if you've met somebody before. How are you going to fence them again? So the pool round is up to 5 hits in 3 minutes. And what you're wanting to do in the pool round is, obviously, victories are really important. So try to win as many of the fights as possible. But every hit is important, because this separates you in the ranking against somebody who might have the same victories. So always try to get every point possible, because this will help you in your final ranking. So the scores from the pool round go to a thing called a direct elimination round. So this is either win or it's an early time to go home. So the direct elimination is based on the ranking from the pools. So it depends where you finished in that ranking, who you're going to be fencing. So if you got a higher ranking, you're going to be potentially fencing somebody lower than you. So if you're in a group of 32, you're number 1, you're going to be fencing number 32. So please check there where you're going to be and what time you're going to be fencing, and just try and keep on winning. Depending what age you are, if you're in the younger age groups, the direct elimination is going to be up to 10 hits. For the older age groups, it's going to be 15 hits. And those for épée and foil, it's going to be, again, depending on what age group. If you're in the younger age groups, it's going to be 3 periods of 2 minutes. In the older age groups, adult age groups, it's going to be 3 periods of 3 minutes. In sabre, the time is not quite, it is the same time, but obviously the weapon is very quick. So they have a slightly separate system. If somebody reaches 8, that means that there is a 1 minute coaching break, and then the fight continues to 15. So these are all moments that you have to consider and plan to. Sometimes tactics can be very much into play. You can run the clock down, or if somebody's ahead, you have to try and win more points before the clock cuts it off. In sabre, that 1 minute break, if you're ahead or behind, you must practice these things mentally. Either get tips from a coach, or it's how you motivate yourself through that minute to change your tactics. The main person you're going to be coming across in a competition is going to be the referee. The referees are hard-working people, and they are there to keep the rules, to follow the rules, and also adjudicate your fencing and decide whether you score the point or not. They are there equipped with 3 cards, the yellow, the red and the black. The yellow is a warning card, and that could be for a multitude of things, whether it's a weapon that has failed, or you've just done some minor infringements. The red card, and that means it's a point to the opponent. So 2 yellow cards would mean that you get a red card and a point to the opponent. And a red card is for more serious infringements to the rules. Then finally, the one you definitely do not want to be presented to you is the black card. So this is definitely for the most serious infringements of the rules, so cheating, violence, anything like that can be a black card. So a black card means you have to leave the venue, you cannot compete in the competition anymore, and then a report will happen and you might get excluded from other competitions. So it's really important that you are on your best behaviour, because black cards can be presented to not only the fencers but also to coaches and parents and supporters if you're disturbing the order on the piste. Now referees, they can make mistakes. They're not infallible. For the national certain level of competitions, they would have video refereeing available, so internationals and some of the top level nationals. So yes, you can ask the referee if they can consult the video if you feel as if you should have been awarded that point. Otherwise, their decision is final, really. But you can ask, as a fencer, you can ask how that decision was come by, and you must do it in an incredibly polite way. So just ask them, say, what did I do to, didn't get the point, and they should be able to answer that, and you should take that as the matter of fact. One thing you should never do is argue with the referee. Even if you really, really feel that what they decided is wrong. Because if you argue, you can quite easily get a yellow card, and then you could get subsequent red cards after even sort of looking. You can look at a referee wrong if they feel as if you are disagreeing with their opinion or decision, that they can continue giving the cards. So yes, please don't argue with the referee. It doesn't do anything. They won't change the decision and you're only going to cause a problem in that competition, that bout, and possible subsequent competitions, because you get a reputation. So it's important not to have a good reputation and not one that as you're an arguer. So you can, if there's a situation where you feel as if the referee has applied the rules wrongly, so it's quite different. If the decision was made on a priority, so in foil and sabre, the referee has to judge who was the attacker, who was the defender, and who had priority at the time of a hit being made. The referees will not change that unless they have, possibly if there's a video referee situation. But if the rules have been applied wrongly, so there's certain things which, going off the back of the piste, if your foot didn't officially pass the line at the back of the piste, and your toe was still in there, and the referee could see, acknowledges that the toe was in, but the heel was out, that means they've applied the rule wrongly, because at the back of the piste, as long as there's a portion of the toe or the foot is inside that box, the heel might be on the outside of the box hitting the floor and the toe might be raised inside the box. And if they acknowledge that is what they saw, but they still deem that as being off-piste, then you could potentially get a DT, and the DT will look at those facts, that interpretation from the referee and yourself, and they can make a final decision of it. But it's very rare this happens, but you do have the right to make an appeal to the DT. Any bad behaviour by fencers and supporters can be carded. So a supporter and an offender can be yellow carded. If they're not fencing, they can get black carded if they continue to be have bad behaviour. That means they're excluded from the venue. And again, just as a caveat to it all, referees work really hard and mistakes can happen. So please be sympathetic. Please, if you see them, get them a coffee or talk to them. This is only going to help build that relationship with them. And they might, it's not about getting favouritism and getting points, but they will look at your fencing in a slightly different way, which may be more positive. But if you're definitely at bad behaviour, you are not going to create a positive impression for a referee to award things easily. So. This slide shows the penalties, the offences and penalties sheet that referees use to apply any cards to a situation. So they have to follow this. If they've seen something that infringes the rules in some way as defined on this penalties sheet, they can use the corresponding card. So it's really worthwhile looking at this and get them down on the internet and seeing what sort of things you should or shouldn't be doing, and what can be carded. Because again, if a referee uses the wrong card for a certain penalty, this is something that you can go to DT and explain that the referee hasn't followed the correct rules. These get updated a lot. These get updated. I'm not saying it's but they do get updated every now and again, and that's because something has happened nationally, internationally, for the rules to be changed and updated. So every so often, have a look at this sheet to make sure that your current understanding is as it should be now. This next slide is about when points aren't being accumulated by fencing. So a few years ago, this was in épée. Fencers can sometimes tactically have a strategy of not scoring points, and this meant the fight potentially looked boring. So internationally, it was in the word frowned upon, and rule came in called passivity and non-combativity. was brought in to encourage fencers to fight and try and score points. So the current system uses the cards in a way with it's called P cards. So this is slightly different. There are a different set of cards to the infringement of the rule cards, and they're identified with obviously the colour and the P. So the application of these P cards, you don't use them, the referees wouldn't use them in pool fights, so fights could end 1-0 when the target is 5. But in direct eliminations, they apply them because the fencers haven't scored a hit within 1 minute. So this is an exact 1 minute, not an impression of a minute. So it's called a shotgun minute. So at the end of 1 minute where a hit hasn't been scored, the fight is stopped and the fencer who's on the lowest score is given a P card. If the fencers are on equal score, both fencers are given a P card. And then if it happens again, this moves on to a P red, and another P red, and then a P black and disqualified. So the P red is still the same as what you would get as an infringement red card. So it's given to the lowest score person, and it's a point to their opponent for that. So it's really, if you want to avoid this type of strategy, just try and score the hit. This next series of slides is about putting you in the referee's shoes. So there's going to be a number of videos, and it shows myself and my other half, Chris, are going to demonstrate some actions. And this is relevant for foil and sabre. I appreciate we've got plastic swords, plastic foils, but the rules of what you're trying to decide upon should be relevant for foil and sabre. So have a go. See what you see and how you decide, and see if you're right. I hope you enjoyed this little journey through preparation for competition, what the refereeing, and some of the things that you can do to try and make sure your competition runs as smoothly as possible. This is part of many educational videos with fencing at home. So please check out our YouTube channel. There's loads of stuff in coaching and lots of other ideas that you may go away and help you. So please check us out.